Alright, hey guys. Sitting here waiting for this hurricane to come, but I wanted to stay on track as long as I could. And we're going to go ahead and film or do the next verse in Matthew 5, verse 5. And like I said, we're looking at all of the, what they call the Beatitudes. And the next one that we have is, Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Now, this word meek in some of your other translations, it might say humble. I don't have a problem with this word, but meek is distinct in the fact that we have a tendency to look at meekness and think that meekness is weakness. Meekness is actually not. Meekness is a willing submission in spite of strength. And a perfect example of this is Christ himself. If we look at Matthew 26, start in verse 52, it says, Then Jesus said unto them, Put up again thy sword into his place, for all they that take up the sword shall perish with the sword. Thinkest thou that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he shall presently give me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then shall the scriptures be fulfilled, that thus it must be? And one of the things that we see here is that Jesus is demonstrating meekness in this particular case because he is letting Peter know. We later on in one of the other Gospels actually find out that it was Peter that cut off the ear of one of the guys who was coming to arrest Jesus. But one of the things that we see here is that Jesus tells him, put the sword up, it's fine. I can call down 12 legions of angels here and just wipe these people out. So Jesus is demonstrating meekness, not in the sense that he is weaker than those who are coming against him, because he's most certainly not, but in the sense that he was submitting to the Father's will. And he says in verse 54, but if we were to fight back, how will the scriptures be fulfilled? And we see this again in verse 56. It says, But all these things were done, that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled. So we can see here, Jesus basically embodies every single one of these Beatitudes here, but we can also see that as the Christian comes to, as he, reaches that poor in spirit state, he begins to grow and begins to mourn over his sin. And then from there, he begins to take on some meek attributes, not being that fighting attitude, that aggressive, but he begins to, maybe another word for it is he begins to become more patient. But we can see here that meekness, as demonstrated by Jesus, is not a weakness. It is not a sense where you are just physically weaker than your opponent and therefore you're meek. That's not it at all. We can see that even Peter was willing to lift up the sword and go at it, even though he was grossly outnumbered. He certainly didn't demonstrate cowardice or anything like this, but by the same token, Jesus told him, you need to back it down a notch, and get Peter to submit in the same way that Jesus was submitting, that God's will be done, and that all of these things had been prophesied and must be done in this manner for a greater good. And sometimes suffering and things like that must occur for a greater purpose. So anyway, wanted to kind of share that with you guys. So God bless.